All right, we have reached the last session here on the main stage for the first day of InsurTech Insights 2024. Have you all had a good day? Yeah, bravo, okay, nice. Made some new connections, hand in the air? Yeah, okay, learned something new, hand in the air? Ready for the last session, hand in the air? There we go. All right, if I can all please have you stand up. Can you all stand up? Is that too much to ask? Perfect. Because then we are going to provide a standing ovation for the last session here on the first day. Is that all right? Perfect. Then please put your hands together for the last session on generative AI.
You really can't see.
All right, welcome everybody. Excited for this last session? All right, it's about the hottest topic in the industry, Gen AI. And I have my esteemed panel here. I'm Denise Garth, I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at Majesco. And I'm gonna have my esteemed panel here introduce themselves. Bob?
Yep, I'm Bob Pick. I'm Executive Vice President and CIO for Tokio Marine North America and Tokio Marine Group Deputy CITO.
I'm Manish Shah. I'm a President and Chief Product Officer at Majesco, working on Gen AI since November 2022.
And hi, I'm Sandeep Mangaraj. I lead the fintech team at Microsoft.
All right, guys. So we've got a list of questions, but please submit your questions. I'll monitor them periodically and pick some to pose to the panel here. So first question, Gen AI and AI are the hottest topic in the industry. They're both valuable but different. How are they different? Where are they best used? What is the power of mixing and matching them? Manish, do you want to start?
Sure. So I think AI is no new thing. I'll tell you that it was my elective in comp science in 1992. But I think that AI has gone through a lot of evolution by itself. But in the latest evolution of Gen AI in November 2022, when OpenAI ChatGPT got 100 million users in 2 months, which was a record adoption, that's when actually it caught an eye. And it actually becomes something very sort of a consumer-based AI that people can see that how can they use this thing. But I think that is just the one flavor of AI from my perspective. At the end of the day, it is not about Gen AI or AI. It is about how can we bring intelligence to our day-to-day life of what we do and how much of that work can be augmented, that we spend up time doing it, that can be done more productively by AI or Gen AI, and how much of that remaining time that we can spend on where we can actually add value as a human being or as a specialist. So my understanding and our views are very simple. Our views are that it is not about a specific Gen AI, which is a generative AI, which actually can help you write, which can help you inquire or search. It is not about a specific purpose-built AI models either. It is about how collectively they can collaborate to produce a higher level of intelligence that can be applied to a specific use case. So what I like to see this thing as we evolve, and we should see it in the speed at which it's evolved, we should see it even more sooner, is that there will be multiple models that is actually going to orchestrate and collaborate with each other, which can include the specific machine learning model, it can include the generative AI models, and they will produce an intelligence that is specific for that workflow or that use case. So that's how we see the evolution of Gen AI and AI to come together.
Bob, we were talking before coming on here, you've kind of identified, as you've had conversations internally, a big difference between when you use Gen AI versus AI. Want to share your perspective?
Yeah, sure enough. And one of the values of generative AI is it's really brought forth kind of a re-emergence of all the different forms of artificial intelligence, machine learning, right down to if, then, else, and select case, and the real simple stuff. But for sure, we had a part of our global emerging leaders training program that we have at Tokio Marine. They had a project where they were going down a path where they thought and they really wanted to use generative AI for it, but properly researching it, they recognized that it was fairly static, algorithmically based. It was a numerical data set that was just applied to a series of different categorizations. And they realized that they could use classic AI faster, simpler, and frankly, less expensively, meaning it's using tools that were already in place. So I think we have to realize that the palette of AI solutions has now expanded greatly. Grok and Fun Mode is my favorite one to use, but it's expanded greatly. But that doesn't mean that generative AI subsumes and replaces the classic. And I think there are a lot of thinking out there. Certainly the hype aspect, and I'm a big believer, I'm very bullish on generative AI, but the hype aspects that do kick in tend to give the indication that generative AI has won the battle, that if there was even a battle. And the reality is it does a number of things very, very well, as you described. Those things that are textually based, that are based in language, those things that are difficult to establish on a kind of performative basis, algorithmic patterns. Well, let's let LLMs do it. Let's let deep learning do it. Neural networks. Let's let them do the work. But there's a lot of great use for the classic AI as well. And those things, being all in insurance, actuarial stuff, generally speaking, lends itself to classic AI and ML a lot more readily than generative AI. But it doesn't mean that generative AI can't really help dig and find incredibly important new insights in the actuarial or traditional data science realms. So it's an and. I'm an and kind of guy. It's definitely an and situation.
And Sandeep, when you guys came out about a year and a half ago, with ChatGPT, now Copilot, you probably had a lot of confusion about it as well. How have you kind of seen it evolve that people really are swimming in the right lanes? And what are you doing from a Microsoft perspective?
So I want to highlight a couple of things. The one thing that Bob and Manish are talking about is really important, and that is, at the end of the day, what we are doing, the outcome we are trying to drive, that should drive what kind of tools, if you want to call them tools, we should be using. Right? What's the best way for us to light up those outcomes? That should be the guiding principle. Having said that, if you look at what traditional AI does really well, is look at vast amount of data and help find that proverbial needle in the haystack. Right? And not only that, you can also look at it and say, is it a needle or is it a toothpick, right? So those are the classic uses, right? Where you have vast amount of data. You want to get patterns out of it. You want to take inference out of it. AI has been used by all of us for a very long time. The departure with generative AI is that, you can, and the key one is generate. It can create content. And that is definitely new. Content, multimodal content, right? You can create text, you can create images, you can create video. So the creative part of it is something that is leading to new use cases. And in fact, one of the ways in which these use cases have come to bear and have gotten a lot of traction is, you talked about ChatGPT, Manish. The interface, right? So what we are able to do with generative AI is we're able to bring the human in the loop, right? So the human now can interact with this very large, complex systems. And honestly, if I were to bet on anyone, I would bet on humans, right? And human ingenuity. So that's what GenAI is doing. It's helping us tap into that potential, and which is why there is a lot of interest in it.
So one of the things we talked about in prepping for this is where do you start to use GenAI in particular and AI into the business solutions? We talked about, is GenAI a goal or a method? Mm-hmm. How do you avoid the paralysis of analysis that we faced with cloud when cloud kind of came to bear and everybody started to say, oh, I'm not sure, is the security good, is it not? And eventually it was just like at rampant, go. Bob, you've got some really interesting perspectives on this.
She says interesting because she's heard me go on and on about this for years. But I do believe it. In the same vein as cloud, agile, generative AI is a method. It's a palette of tools. It's not necessarily a goal. At least that's the way we view it at Token Marine. So we want to experiment, and indeed, I think many, if not all of us in the insurance industry, are actively experimenting with these things. But we recognize that we're a regulated industry. We're not running off into the scarier, more fragile, or more heavily sensitive or regulated areas of our business. We're doing things like summarizing meetings. Actually, a number of our group companies are using Microsoft Copilot very effectively. We did a recent survey of a group of 250 across all business departments, and they self-estimated a daily time savings of between 19 and 28 minutes from Copilot. But using those features and functions to be able to create drafts, to be able to go from Word doc to PowerPoint, to be able to ask in plain language for simple insights from a spreadsheet, all incredibly useful. The other thing that we see being a multinational is the ease of translation. Being able, actually, ironically, we hosted a forum on generative AI. We transcribed it. We published it in 3 languages, summarized it, and it took about 20 minutes to get that out to a whole bunch of people around the globe. So the idea of adoption, I think, is something where the line we've used, and we're not alone, is Copilot does not mean autopilot. So you're human in the loop, that we still have, the human beings are accountable. Generative AI in any form, shape is not accountable. So we have to make sure that we're applying it in the appropriate place. But I think for us, the experimentation that's going on is definitely accelerated well beyond what we saw with cloud, and certainly what we saw beyond with blockchain, which was a hammer in search of a nail now for the better part of a decade. But I think the idea of safely, incrementally trying through platform partners like Microsoft, where we don't have to do a lot of the technical heavy lifting, a lot of the architectural vetting, the security vetting has already been completed or simply needs to be refreshed or extended. This is a great convenience to us because we're not going to invent this ourselves. We're going to work with partners to be able to do this and bring it to our business.
Sandeep, what's your view?
Yeah, I mean, partnership is really important. Look at Microsoft, right? Our investments have also been through partners, right? It's our partnership with OpenAI, as an example, that has, allowed us to bring these technologies to market really, really fast, right? And accelerate the journey that all of us were in. The thing Bob, I like the way you talked about, using copilots, right? And there are a lot of copilots and offerings available today. There's a rich ecosystem. Manish may have something to say about it, of copilots that are being developed, right? So the good news is that actually lets you flip the script to transformation, right? So you don't have to crawl, walk, or run. You can start running today because of the investments that the large platform players have made, right? It's going to be secure. It's going to be compliant. It's going to make sure that your privacy and other concerns are taken into account. And you can start getting experience today. So my counsel is start today. There is no reason to wait. Now, when you start this journey, what happens, and what we have seen happen across the board, is you learn things that you don't know, right? There are unanticipated consequences that comes in when you start, your experiment and your experience using GenAI. That is when you go from running to walking, because that is when you will see, how do I take into account my unique data, my unique insights? How can I leverage GenAI where it makes sense, traditional AI where it makes sense, workflow tools when it makes sense, to make sure that it's more context appropriate. And then the last phase is when, and that's where we are going to be heading to, the question is when, that's when the new business models are going to come, right? And that is where the real differentiation is going to happen. And my sincere view, having seen what's happened in the last 18 months, it's sooner than we think.
So one of the things that's really crucial is about data. Data is absolutely fundamental to being able to leverage GenAI or AI. And quite frankly, it's one of our industry's biggest challenges. I remember back when I was at Accord, Bob, you'll probably remember this, I talked about data as the lifeblood of the industry. But we've never treated it as an asset and the strategic asset that it is. And oftentimes it's not accessible in legacy systems. Even in some of the modern systems, you don't get access to all your data because it's just transactional data and some of the data stays within it. You've got it's quality issues, you've got issues of not being well defined, and you got governance. So how does an insurer's data strategy need to change and adapt? And what approaches can cut through these challenges? Manish, I'll turn this over to you because it's something that is fundamental to what you've really kind of architected for us at Majesco.
Yeah, I mean, it's an old saying and everyone knows data is a new oil and all those things, but I think we still as an industry continues to struggle. And fundamentally, the reason why we are struggling is that we are looking for that one end-all, be-all data set that actually connects every single data sources from every single systems where you can just tap into for whatever that you want to do. And I think that's kind of a one place, one system is kind of an old concept from our perspective, as if you know how our IT landscape has been sort of emerged from one monolith system into a microservices. I think that's exactly how we see as data. So first of all, the data needs to be liberated from every system. It cannot be a selective data that is going out of your mission critical systems, whether it is a core systems or any other point of sale, point of service, whatever those systems are. You can't have a selective data saying, okay, what is it that you want? I will just get you this kind of data. Every single data element needs to be liberated. Then there needs to be an ability to access that data. It's just very basic table stake, but I will not take this thing as granted that everybody has those table stakes at the moment available. And I think that one of the things that you have to see from every systems or every vendor, and I think to be honest with you, whoever has that point of sale or point of service systems, it is their responsibility to have this data liberated for you, have this data available for access, and you should have multiple options in terms of having those data available, how to access them. Because the use of that data is not just about the reports, but use of that data is going to come in terms of building and homegrown models, or building a small language models, or building a classic AI models. Just something that you can do, or you can do it with the partners, you're still going to need the data. One of the myths is that, oh, I need to have millions of data to create the model. Actually, you don't need millions of data. It is about the cardinality and variety of the data that you have to consider. Once you have that data available and you have those models available, think about the decision making and the intelligence that you can bring it back as a feedback into your point of sale and point of service system. So having a sound, holistic data strategy that is a bit decentralized is far more important than having an enterprise data warehouse in this day and age.
Bob, your perspective, I mean, we talked about a federated set of companies, you got challenges from that perspective. What's been your approach to cut through these issues?
Yeah, for sure. And when you think of, we're in 46 countries, so you're crossing language lines, cultural lines, currency, all those sorts of things. And each of our businesses is largely unique to their particular market. So on a global basis, it's a huge challenge. Now, the nice thing is a technical matter, and a number of us were speaking about this earlier today, just a group of both brokers and carriers. It's never been easier to integrate than it is today. That doesn't mean it's easy, but it's never been easier. It's never been as inexpensive to store as it is today. It doesn't mean it's cheap, but it means we have a lot more capabilities now. Going into data mesh technologies where you leave your data where it is, but you still have full operational access to it. These things are all critically important as technology tools. However, one of the things that generative AI has really brought to the fore, and I've said this too often, prompt engineering gets all the airtime, data engineering is where it's at. If your data is not engineered properly for generative AI or any of these items, you're hosed, it isn't going to happen. And coming to agreement on simple data definitions, understanding your lineages. Our chief architect, Steve Haney, talks about this for many, many years. Getting that data so it's conversant together. And that can it absolutely involves technical tools, but it also involves a lot of cultural work, a lot of process work, and a whole heck of a lot of conversation with underwriting and actuary and distribution, all that, so that you have a common language in your data, a common glossary there. That's extremely challenging on an international scale, and even within an individual country, it's extremely challenging because the way one system provider defines its data is necessarily different than another, especially when you're talking about legacy systems. I think modern systems do a lot better of kind of keeping the things that are plainly cast, But those differences for those of us, and most carriers end up collecting systems over a long period of time, make it extremely difficult. So we look for tools that provide that Hitchhiker's Guide Babelfish. That's the third time I've used that reference today. That translator in the middle, where we can rely on that to provide that one pane of glass, that one point of access, that observatory capability across this very disparate set of data without forcing us to go back and re-engineer data in situ in all those component systems.
And that really gets to a conversation we had when we were prepping, and it really says, what's the responsibility of platform solution partners that we talked about? And because this effort is not for the faint of heart. There's a big investment from an infrastructure standpoint, and it's a big investment from a framework standpoint, and it's a big investment into business solutions and into talent. So it goes across a lot of different areas. What expectations should insurers have from their infrastructure partners, from their platform solution partners, and how does this shift the investment of tech stack direction to partners? Sandeep, I mean, we're dependent on you right now, so I'll start with you, and then I'm going to go to Manish.
Yeah, so I'll actually start off with something that Bob ended with, which is it's not a capability issue today. It's actually a people and governance issue, right? And I'm going to take it a little further, right? That's something that we have seen as we have undertaken our digital transformation journey, right? Like we have fundamentally changed the way we do our business. And what have we learned? For example, governance is really important because guess what governance does? Governance and having solid governance gives you the license, and that's the ticket. That's actually foundational for you to be able to use data responsibly, right? So what we have been doing is we have been taking all these lessons that we have learned and incorporated it into not just the way we work, but how our platforms can enable our partners, right, to be able to get to the outcomes they're trying to get to responsibly. Now, specifically, like what are the three fundamental things that Microsoft is very, very focused on? First, trust. We are in an industry, goes without saying, right? In the AI context, trust becomes even more important. So trust is fundamental to what you do. Second is security. We need to have, that's foundational, right? We need to make sure that we have the most secure platform. And as you know, this is something that's evolving every day, every second. But that is foundational to what we do. We want to make sure that we can provide a trusted and secure platform. And in financial services and other regulated industry, compliance is also very, very, very important, right? So we want to make sure that we are taking care of those three foundational elements. And after that, for true partnership, it's, if you have trust, you have security, you have compliance, then it's a question of making sure that we can identify what are the goals that we need to go towards and how we can help each other meet those goals. Right? That's honestly how we are going, and that's what we expect from our partners and what our partners expect from us.
So kind of adding to that, shifting the investment to the tech stack and how does it become a leader? Manish, kind of expand upon that, us on top of Microsoft from a platform perspective.
Yeah, I mean, look, when GenAI came, that's when we really all sort of see that what is the art of possible. And when we started seeing an art of possible, our vision was very straightforward. Our vision was not that we are going to give you an AI tool that will be a kind of a toy that you can excite everybody, but then when it is a time to deliver a real ROI, it becomes kind of, a puppet show kind of a situation. So our approach was very straightforward. Our approach was that we want to embed the AI in a seamless manner so that whatever you could do or you were doing it, you would do exponentially faster with a less effort. You will be able to make a way better decision and you will have a really outstanding customer experience. If we cannot do those things with that AI that is embedded in it seamlessly, then at this point, it just becomes more of a toy. And in order to do that, when we set that vision somewhere in early 2023, we were talking with Sandeep and his team on Microsoft, and at that point, us not knowing that they are building something similar, which they called it in Microsoft Office Copilot at that point. And the approach was very straight, that I'm writing a document, I'm doing a PowerPoint, I'm writing an Excel. Well, how can I do all those things better, faster? And that was an embedded AI solution, which is exactly the path that we were headed into. And it seemed like, okay, that should be no-brainer. I think we can come together. We can use some of the tech stack that Microsoft has, and we do use it. But obviously, I'm in an industry, and I'm proud to say that we make everything a little bit more complex. So when it comes to sending the messages to the Copilot or to the OpenAI, it turns out that our policy document sizes are too much or too big in order to actually come with a reasonable latency with an information's coming back from it, or a cost that it will create for per message and so forth. So there were significant technical challenges that we uncovered at the time when we were trying to embed the AI and OpenAI into our solution. And that's where our engineers kind of worked together for roughly a year or so in terms of overcoming those challenges. And it was a very interesting journey, because when you put a high-level goal into the place, I think the way and the speed at which this technology is evolving, I think everything is possible. I can tell you back a year ago, sending those informations to a large language model were very limited in terms of the size. Now the size is like much bigger, 4 times higher. And then just recently in the new GPT 4.0 model, you can now double that size at half the cost. And all those things are happening in just a matter of time. So the tech stack is important. So we partner with Microsoft because, again, responsible AI, compliance, full transparency, all those things are hallmark of this thing. And we don't want to build something that is so proprietary that it doesn't scale. So Microsoft is putting billions of dollars of investment into the tech part of it, but then we are using that tech, and then we are putting an investment from an insurance perspective to say that how can we now train that tech and tailor it for an insurance use cases, embed those use cases in our point of sales and services so that you can get a tangible ROI quickly.
Bob, from your perspective, I think it changes, the expectations that you now have on your platform solution providers and your infrastructure partners. It changes kind of the risk profiles. As you kind of go in and you look at them, it's not just about the financial risk, but it's about the strategic risk. Are they investing in some of this stuff that's going to keep you? Do you have any other additional thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have a myriad thoughts. And just to kind of play off Manish a little bit, when we think of the tech stack for generative AI, that's one of the things that gives, I think, a lot of us the most agita is there is no singular tech stack. It's like the early days of cloud, and I mean even pre-Amazon cloud, when you could work with a provider and they would give you basically an assemblage of parts on the floor, and you had to find engineers to begin to build them together. That's part of the reason that cloud adoption was so light in the early days. Now, there's wonderful productized sets that are fully productionized, and they're stacks, and you can just adopt in, and it's very easy to do. In the generative AI space, that's still unfolding. It is unfolding very quickly. But the point for carriers like us is we're not going to invent that tech stack. We're not going to roll our own. As a matter of fact, we kind of shout around a number that has no basis in actual fact, but the general sense is that we'll probably consume 80% of generative AI via our platform partners rather than anything that we'll create bespoke internal. Certainly when it comes to building our own foundation models, that sort of thing, probably shy away from that most of the time. We'll make use of RAG and some of the ways that we can make it bespoke to us higher up the stack. But we're not going to roll our own because the risk of extinction, the risk of obsolescence, and the risk of, frankly, just confusion is too high. So we rely on partners like Majesco and Microsoft, but it's actually a huge advantage for all of us because we already speak Microsoft Azure. So that Majesco is on Microsoft Azure means we're already speaking somewhat of a similar language. So there's a familiarity there that didn't exist when we were dealing with core system partners as software OEMs, and we install it in our world, and there's a whole other set of issues there. And it does allow us then to transfer that risk to our friends at Majesco and other platform partners, but also to Microsoft and other cloud services partners. Insofar as they're responsible for a whole host of things that previously we would have. And these are partners that we already have great relationships with, very broad relationships with. So to your point, the trust is there, the awareness is there. And from an engineering perspective, we already know those piece parts. We're already working with them every day. So the exciting part for us is seeing the stacks begin to firm up and the features and functions very, very quickly being built out to being much more comprehensive and much more human engineerable from our perspective, where we don't have people that are expert every day in this stuff as Microsoft does. And exactly as Manish said, Majesco can then focus on the insurance part. We can focus on being a carrier using these platforms as opposed to having to be platform engineers ourselves. And that goes for the AI piece, but frankly, it also goes for the rest of it too.
Yep.
Huge advantage in the future.
Yep. So we have a lot of talk about Gen AI, and business value comes up. There has to be some business value. And I got to tell, I've been in this industry a long time, as you know, Bob. And I think this has one of the best opportunities to really have a transformational aspect to operations that we haven't seen since we automated. And there's a lot of potential to revolutionize the business, and there's a lot of potential in use cases. Bob, why don't you kind of give your perspective, and then Manish, I'd like you to talk about those use cases.
For sure. I mean, even beyond the use of Copilot that we mentioned before, our Tokio Marine companies, I think we're very normal across carriers. We're doing a lot of experimentation with documentation comparison, with adopting criteria and then using generative AI to assess vast stacks of documents and make sense of them, to correlate things and find insights in those documents that heretofore can only be done by a relatively highly trained human being, maybe not an expert, but relatively highly trained. So we're doing a lot of things in those spaces, and those are definitely bearing fruit. But I would say the business value conversation is one that I find ourselves and a lot of our competitors out there treading a little lightly on now, because no one wants to not experiment because there isn't an ROI right now. So I do see, and I've said probably too often, that I don't think insurance gives ourselves enough credit for the innovation that we have brought and the innovations that we're undertaking now, certainly generative AI among them. But I think as things grow and continue and begin to settle out, that value is definitely going to begin to pop to the fore. I'm in the camp, I know there are a couple of camps, I'm in the camp that generative AI is disruptive and transformative, but I don't think it's going to be a single moment. I think it's going to be a series of substantial increments that aggregated over time, we realize, wow, things have really changed. But it's not one aha disruption, the world changes. But I think we're already beginning to see those early stages as things are actually moved into production, regardless of what any analysts say. There's not a whole lot that's really in production beyond Copilot-like functionality, but as transactional generative AI, where it's woven in to that movement, to that transaction, to those insights, I think we're going to start to see the tick, tick, tick of those incremental improvements that lead to true transformation.
Manish?
Yeah, so I'll answer your question in two ways. The business value from a technical perspective and a business value from a strategic perspective. From a technical perspective, I think it's pretty straightforward from how you can probably these things. Is productivity is a big factor in terms of every industry, not just insurance. Actually, reading a report of all the industries and who can actually benefit most, insurance was like the fourth industry that can benefit most using the productivity gains of the generative AI. So there is a lot of savings. We also have a workforce issue. There is a lot of specialized underwriting skills, and they're not sort of growing significantly. Our risk complexity is growing, and we need to free up those underwriters from doing some of those works that AI can do it, which is not really needing their skills. So it can help grow the business faster without those skills constraint. So I think that there is a ROI that you can prove it. Like we did the similar time study as you did for the Microsoft Copilot on the Majesco Copilot, and with a group of customers. And it was pretty straightforward that the task that used to take 20-25 minutes was taking less than 30 seconds. What that really means is that you can actually handle a lot more volume. You can grow your business, you can change the expense ratios, and so forth and so on. So I think that ROI can be proven from a technical perspective. The question gonna come though in that is what use cases you will select. And to be honest with you, I hope we as an industry don't do this thing, is try to get an answer for every single corner case use cases that we think that we should implement an AI for, because we're going to have a challenge, because not every use cases will be easy to implement. Some going to require a lot of regulatory scrutiny. Some's going to be a lot of nervous heads in the boardroom saying what kind of liability that we are exposing ourselves to. And we should not have those use cases hold up the simple use cases at the customer service level or at the productivity level to get us the benefit. So selection of the use cases that are, I would call it non-controversial, something that can give you a big impact, but it's not going to require you to sort of, take so much longer to implement it, is very important. Now, strategically speaking, is my view. That doesn't mean everybody agrees to it, but this is what I believe. I think that strategically it positions your organization to be viable in next 10 years. The way I see it is AI revolution. I call it an AI age, similar to industrial age or information age. And I think we are entering into an AI age. And with an AI age, what's going to happen is it's not about making business more efficient. It is going to change the business models. And those shift into the business models means what kind of products you deliver, what price you charge, what kind of service you provide, what kind of distribution management you have, and how your customer consume your services. All of them is going to get impacted. So unless you start experimenting sooner and start building that quotient in AI higher over time through experimentation, and stay caught up with the advancements into the AI technology, it's a very good chance that the businesses can have a significant disadvantage in next 3 to 4 or 5 years to even stay viable against the businesses who have actually adopted the AI faster. So to me, from a strategic perspective, forget the ROI. I think it's going to be a viability of a business. If they use or not use the AI, that will determine their fate.
If I may add one thing, Denise, on this. We're talking about efficiency and effectiveness improvement. I love the where you're talking about strategically what's going to change, because the fundamental promise of this technology and where we are headed is it's going to increase the size of the tent. Previously, people who could not interact with this digital world that we are moving to could not contribute to the digital world because they did not know the tools can talk, know how to interact using natural language. And so that's where the real big ROI potential comes. We're going to have a bigger tent. Every product manager can now go and make changes to their product, not just develop the roadmap and where you're headed, but actually work on it. And so that's where the real promise is. We're going to have a much bigger tent.
So I'm going to try to wrap this up. And one of the things is that the pace of advancement has just been ridiculous. I mean, in 18 months, it's just been, it's been like a shooting star. And in fact, OpenAI's co-founder, Sam Altman, has stated that ChatGPT-4 is the dumbest model anyone will ever have to use again by a lot. He stated there would be major future investments in AI development. So I'm going to ask you, Sandeep, what's next? You guys already announced a bunch of new stuff. What's next? And then from both Manish and Bob, what do you see as the future? And do you see that it can begin to create gaps between leaders who are using it and those that are not, from a operational efficiency and cost perspective that makes them much more competitive in the market? So Sandeep?
Yeah, so I'll just look at what has driven us and brought us where we are, right? It's new frameworks like the Transformer framework. That's not going to stop. There are going to be new frameworks and additional kind of frameworks that are going to come. It's the ability to use massive amount of compute resources. That trend is going one way. And it's also about data, and not just crawling the internet, which is obviously a good source of information, but quality of data. The quality of data you are, for example, using for reinforcement learning, that's going to have a big differentiator. And that also, we're having better quality sources and more learnings as we go there. So if you take those three trends and and project it forward, at least in the immediate future, what's going to happen? The models are going to get better. They will keep on surprising us. and they're going to get cheaper and more accessible.
Okay, Manish?
Yeah, I think the AI is going to be democratized. Next year, when we meet here, it's going to look very different. I can guarantee you that much. I don't know exactly how it will look, but it will look smarter. It will be more accessible. It will be more cheaper. And we all will be using, or some or other ways, the AI way more than we are using it today. So I think that, as I mentioned earlier, the business model is going to start to shift. It's going to mandate. If we are the leader, then we can influence how the industry go. Those who will be slower, they're going to have to sort of follow the lead of the leaders in terms of how they actually respond to it. But there is no such thing as a grand AI strategy. I think starting small, learning quickly, and iterate quickly is really the way I think to go, because the technology is changing at much faster pace than any other tech has ever changed.
And Bob?
Yeah, and I'll say, as excited as we are about our internal experimentation, we're equally or more excited about what our partners are doing, because they're able to make the broader investments and the deeper investments in this space far more than we can. So I'll say the increasing productization of generative AI is very exciting, very helpful, and I think that's obviously a trend that continues. The normalization of generative AI, right now it's still special and cute and fun, but I think it's very well on the way to just becoming part of everything. It's part of what we do. I am no longer surprised in any interface that I encounter on the web whenever it's predictively telling me and giving me all sorts of things. That's generative AI on the back end. It's becoming less special, and I mean that in a very favorable way. It is very quickly being baked into all these things that we're doing as consumers and also as business people. I think that trend continues. And I think for us in insurance and on the carrier end of things, seeing that begin to affect how we transact, think of it as generating content and pre-fill is a huge issue that we all have, but using the power of generative AI to more predictively and relevantly pre-fill all sorts and manner of things. Very simple thing, but that cracks a code that has been very difficult as an industry for us to sort out. The notion of a generative AI-powered underwriting workbench is very, very different. As you were saying, it's a different model than an old school underwriting workbench, for example. So those types of evolutions, I think we're very excited about.
All right, thank you. Well, let's thank this esteemed panel, Bob, Manish, and Sandeep, and all of us will be around. We'll be over at our booth at 1002, and you feel free to ask them any questions along the way. So thank you very much for attending.
Thank you.
Thank you.